This is a tutorial for the first assignment of Basic Graphic Design, Week 1. I'm going to fly over on eCampus to the assignment page. There's a couple of announcements, there's another small assignment before that, and then we get to 01.1, the elements and principles of design. There is a link attached to this assignment. Actually, it's not attached, so it's right above it. It says Elements and Principles of Design. This is an external link. If you click on that, it'll take you to a list of vocabulary words. This is basically a reading exercise. These are the elements of design as well as the principles of design. There's 16 definitions. These are the concepts we're going to be working with this semester. Are they 100% the definitions? This is what it means? Well, there's always a matter of opinion. There's always what the book says. The book actually has a more compact list of elements and principles of design. But these are the ones that I hope will get us started in the conversation. Whenever you read about color, when you read about movement, space, etc., what does it mean to you? What do you think of when you think of these concepts? This first assignment is going to allow you to express that in a quick and technologically savvy way, I guess. Using Photoshop, we'll be able to look for some images and create a quick view of what we think the elements and principles of design are or should be. I'll navigate out of that. I'm going to open up my Photoshop. There it is. And actually, before I do that, let me close it just momentarily. I'm working in Windows, and I created a folder in my desktop called Week 01. You don't have to create a folder. If you're comfortable enough with file management and you know where you're saving files, great. I just want to be able to go and reach for my saved files fairly quick. That being said, let's go back to Photoshop and, more importantly, the directions for this exercise. So I've just told you what the reading part is, what the elements and principles of design are, and read on them, get familiar with it, and make sure that you read what the specifications, the specs of the assignment are. You're going to generate a series of visual examples and solutions to define, communicate, and illustrate the vocabulary of the elements and principles of design. That's a lot of verbiage, a lot of words for... Basically, you're going to be creating a picture using other pictures using Photoshop. The files that are below the assignment sort of show you what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating a 10 by 10 image that's in the specs right here. By 10 by 10, I mean 10 inches by 10 inches. And we're going to create a few 8 blocks per page in 2 separate documents so that in the end we can put in all of the elements of design and the principles of design into an image. There is a sample just below that of what one of the final documents might look like. Make sure that they are 10 by 10, that the specifications are correct. Every image turned in by students will probably look a little different. If it looks a little bit close to what's being demonstrated here, that would be great. But the process you'll be creating a balanced layout in Adobe Photoshop. I'll show you what that means and when we get started with it. You're going to be doing some research and development, R&D. Where will you find your visual inspiration and research? Well, there's Google for sure, or whatever your favorite search engine is. Also on the left in eCampus, there's going to be a link, or actually there is already a link, called Class Resources. If you click on that, you'll get a list of places where you can find public domain images. The point of public domain images being, let's not necessarily go out and steal images. Let's not use them irresponsibly. We're not going to be selling these images once we're done. If you end up with something great, hopefully it's the beginning of your own work where you will go and acquire the image through legal means, but since we're just dealing with these images in class, don't get too worked up about it. Just make sure that you're working within the spirit of public domain. I'll go back to the assignment, and I think that should be enough to get us started. And by that I mean, let's go to Photoshop, and I know that we need a 10 by 10 image, so I'll create new, and I'll go into the preset details and change from pixels to inches, and change the dimensions to 10 by 10 inches. So that's 10 by 10. Resolution, if you're at 72, let's change that to 300 pixels per inch. We're going to be working in RGB, red, green, and blue colors, and background can be white, doesn't matter, but let's create then. Now I have an image that's 10 by 10 inches. I'm going to press Ctrl-0 to zoom in a little bit and see the whole thing. I also want to make sure that I can see my layers, because this will be a Photoshop document in the end. I don't want a flat file. A flat file like JPEG or PNG is not going to do. I need to see all the layers to see the work, and it will also make your work a lot easier when you're working with layers. If you don't have Photoshop or access to it right now, make sure that you are able to use Photoshop. If it's beyond your price point, I will also be recording some directions on how to use public domain, or actually open source software to complete some assignments. I already have my file then, and if I go back and look at the assignment, I want to make 8 boxes. They don't have to be orange, but they have to be balanced so that they all fit in the space, 10 by 10. I'm also going to include some text so that each one of the definitions is included. I'm going to take note of movement being probably the longest word here, so that's the first one I'll start with. And I'll also have a legend below that says the elements of design. When we're done, like I said, it'll look a little bit like this. I think that we'll see lots of different images being brought in for these assignments, which is fine. I'm going to, well, I like to use some guidelines. I'm going to drag from the ruler a guideline to the middle. It'll snap in somewhere around there, and I'll do the same thing from the left so that I know where the center of the document is. This kind of helps me guide my way so that I know that I have this much space to fit 2 boxes and then 2 boxes on this side. I'm going to use my my Marquee tool and click and drag, and when holding the shift key so that I'm drawing a square, it's telling me that it's all about 581 pixels, 585. It doesn't matter how big it is as long as I know that it'll fit twice in this area. Now that I've created the marquee, I want to make sure that I'm in a new layer. Currently I'm in the background. If you don't see the layer, you can always go to Window and find layers. Make sure that they're turned on. You can also, in case the screen doesn't look anything like this, you can change or rearrange your workspace using the essentials, but I'm going to reset them so that they go back to factory settings. This is what it would look like if I had just installed Photoshop. I've had Photoshop installed in this machine since I bought it a few years ago. I'm going to then, in my layers, create a new one. I'll click on the plus. Here's my new layer called Layer 1. If this were my Photoshop class, Artsy 1302, I would tell you to start renaming the layers, but we don't need to be that specific just yet. I still have the marquee going there, and I'm in a new layer so that anything that happens will be for this layer exclusively. I'm going to fill the area with a color. The sample is orange, but you can use whatever color you want. In the end, we're going to cover it up. You can click on the foreground color to pick a new one. You could also go and find the swatches and see what what colors there are out there. There's millions of them. Pick one. I'm going to pick blue. Well, actually, it's already picked, so my foreground color is blue, and since my marquee is going, I'm going to Edit, Menu, and select Fill. I'm going to make sure that the fill is with the foreground color so that it's blue. You could also pick a new color at this point, but we're already working with blue, so that's fine. I'll click OK, and now I have a square. I'm going to deselect so that the marquee turns off. I can select and deselect. Control D would have been my shortcut. In a Mac, that's Apple D or Command D. I'm an old-timey Macintosh user. So now I have a square in that layer. I don't see the layers anymore. Let me turn it back on. Maybe I'm going to minimize my swatches by double-clicking them. And now I see my layers a little bit better. When I use the Move tool to make sure that, yes, I do have a square, that it's independent of the rest of the image, I'm going to need 4 of these. So let's start to make some copies. In the PC, it's simple enough. You press and hold the Alt key while you're in that layer. See how the icon changes? The cursor changed from a single arrow to a double arrow. That tells me that this is going to make a copy, make a duplicate copy. I click and I drag, and my copy moves along. Now I have 2 squares, and more importantly, I have 2 layers. If I do the same thing on that other layer, which is now called Layer 1 Copy, I can move the copy along and finally do it one last time. Now I have 4 squares. We want a balanced image, so spread them out so that there's a equal space or close to equal along all of these things. If you want to make sure that there's equal space, Layer 1 Copy 3, this layer is selected. I can tell because the gray area is a little bit different than the rest of it. I'm going to press Control and click on the other layers to select them. Now that I have all the layers selected, everything can be changed and moved at once. I do have the Move tool going, so I can move everything at once. But since I'm going to change the balance on these, see these tools on top that says Show Transform Controls, but next to it there are some icons that will allow us to redistribute what we have selected. There is one icon that says Distribute Horizontally, so this should give us equal space in between the squares. And now that they're redistributed, I can move them toward the center. And now this is balanced, more balanced anyway. I still have all of these 4 layers selected, so if I hold and press the Alt key and hover on top of them, my cursor changes to make a duplicate. I'm going to click and drag below to right about here. Just make sure that you have enough space to fit in the words. I already forgot what the longest word was, but actually it is movement. I'm going to start with this one so that I have text below all of these squares. Click on the T for text, and I'll come to the very top layer so that everything, the hierarchy keeps on going up. I'll click below that. Before I do that, let me change the text color. Currently it's blue to black. Right there. Click OK. Now I have black text coming up. I'll click below that first box, or in this case the last one, and type in movement. Movement. I'm going to center the text. And see, since this is the longest word, it goes a little bit beyond that. Whatever, you can pick another font if you'd like. I'm going to see if I have Helvetica Condensed or something like that, or actually Arial. Arial Narrow Bold should work. I'll use the Move tool to center it a little bit better, and I think that would work just fine right about there. Just like I copied the boxes before, I can copy the text and repeat that for all the boxes. Using the text tool, I can start to change the words themselves. So I'll type in color. All of these terms are in that link, line, and mass. These 4 words are now there. I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm going to click on the very top layer so that color is selected. And then I can either press Control on each one of these or simply press and hold Shift and click on the last one. And now all of these 4 layers are selected. And using the same tool that I use over here, except now I want them to be not distributed horizontally, I want them to be aligned vertically, or align the top edges anyway. Now they're all on the same plane. They're still selected, so if I press and hold my Alt key, I can click and drag all these words and place them below the boxes at the bottom. Once that happens, using the text tool, the letter T, I can change the value of the text to say space, texture, not texture, I like that word, but it's not a word, texture, followed by type and value. So I've been working for about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. It's time to save this, because if my computer crashes or my internet connection goes, who knows what's going to happen. I'll click on File, tell it to save as, commit the type layer edits before saving. Well, I guess I was changing something, but I like the word value. I'm going to keep it. I'll commit. And then go and find in my desktop the folder that I created. I think I called it week 1. Well, I guess I talked enough about the computer crashing that it was thinking about it. Here's week 1. And this is a Photoshop document. This is a layer document. Everything that is going on here will be saved as such. The layers will remain so that we can come back and change this. We are going to make another version of this once we're done with it. That will be the principles of design. These are the elements of design. Let's name this then. I'll name it, because this is week 1, I'll call it week 01 hyphen elements. You could use spaces because we're using modern equipment. Please make sure that all of your layers are visible. Make sure that you know that this is a PSD. Make sure that you're saving a Photoshop document. So I'll click on Save. Maximize compatibility. It's fine if it's checked. I'll click OK. I only have one version of Photoshop, this one, and it's fairly new. So I've gotten started. I know that in the sample we say that these are going to be the elements of design, so I'll come below and type just that, the elements of design. So now we're getting started with this, 18 minutes in. I'm going to go back to the assignment. Like I said, by now you should have already seen and hopefully read everything about the elements and principles of design. But it's fairly simple to go and find sample images. Color. We're all familiar with color. We've been using color since before we started school. So let's see how we can define it visually. In the sample, you'll see, well, we just found a very colorful image. In this, there's balls of different colors. Lines in design look great. Mass in design, this is a huge object, piece of art. Movement, easy to see. Space, etc., etc. There's 16 terms in total. Let's do a quick Google search. I'm going to search for color in design. And I get a lot of good information about color and design, but I want images. Here are some images of color design. Some of these look great. I like this one, the importance of colors for design. It's a very rich, powerful image. Let's click on that. It's showing me a preview on the right side. I can right click and copy or save the image. I'm going to save the image as and save it in week 1. It's a ping image, but that's fine because Photoshop can open all kinds of images. I'll save it there. And actually I just paused and rewound the video. I saved it in the wrong place because I'll right click again, save the image as, and yes, I saved it inside a different folder. Where I wanted to actually save it, it's in desktop week 1, and I'll just keep it as colors or color. That way when I go to Photoshop, I can go File, Open, and there's the colors file. Now it's open and I have the file here. I want to fit it into one of the squares. Simple enough. Multiple ways of doing this. I can make a square selection like I did before with the Marquee tool. I'll use the Marquee tool right there. I'll get a square by pressing Shift and dragging and getting a square going. And now I can copy that part, edit, copy, Control C. Coming back here, I want to make sure that I'm above color, that I'm above everything. So I'll just click at the very top layer and press Control V as in Victor, or paste, edit paste would work just as well. Control V. It's the same thing. There's my square. It's a little bit larger than the square I already have, but there's some multiple ways of changing the dimensions here to scale. You can either press Control T, it would be Command T on your Apple. That way you can you have these anchors appear, and you can resize the image to fit in the square. That's one way to do it. I'll press Escape. I'm still working with the same image. Another way that you could do this, scaling that is, I'm in this layer, I'll change the opacity from 100% to less than that. I'll press Control T again and I can scale the same way, and I can make a little bit better guess at how large it needs to be. I'll press Escape to try something else. I'll change the opacity to 100. And the other thing, I guess, and I've done this plenty of times, if I can remember it now from Photoshop class, I'm going to click on the eye so that I don't see it anymore. I'm going to use the magic wand and click on that blue, and by that blue I mean this blue on this layer. I can right click and see what layer this needs to be. Actually, it doesn't show me right away, but it's one of the very bottom layers. This, okay, now I wish I had named these, right? It's not this one, it's this layer right here. I don't need a selection, but the magic one, then I can select the blue of layer 1. Now I have that square again. If I come back to the layer 2, the one that I just pasted, I can select it, make sure that I can see it by clicking the eye, and then I can create a mask on top of that. And now it's just limited to that area. And I know that that was kind of garbled, 3 different ways of doing it. Hopefully you caught one so that you can continue to do this along the way. I'm going to do one more as an example. I'm going to make another Google search. I already did color and design. Let's do lines in design. And I get lots of cool images. This one serves both purposes, lines and color. There's plenty of lines in black and white, in different shapes. It's up to you. Don't use the same ones necessarily that I use. Use something that attracts you, something that defines it for you. I'll right click, copy that image as well. Actually, I could copy the image or I could save it, which is what I said I was going to do. Save image as, and I'll save that one as lines. That one's a JPEG. I'll go back to Photoshop, File, and Open, and there's the lines. I'm going to select all of this, Control A as in Apple, so all, select all. You could also say select menu all, and then copy, edit, copy, or Control C. I'm going to go to my second box, the line. In my original picture, it's this layer. I'll use the magic wand again. Go back to the very top. And here's another thing that you can do. You can go to Edit, Paste Special, and Paste Into. So what I copied fits inside of that area exclusively. Now that it's in there, I can use the Move tool, make sure that I'm in the area where the image is visible, press Control T as in Tom, and then I can resize it. And this way, even if I go beyond, it'll stick just fine. I like the way that the new Photoshop allows you to auto-align as you're moving things along. So now I have shown you how to do the first two boxes. There are 16 boxes in total. There's the 8 for the elements of design. You'll be creating another 8 for the principles of design. I have already saved this image file and save as. I can just save again, Control S, File Save. And then that way the file that I have saved in my desktop is available for my use. Once you're done with the elements of design and the principles of design and you're ready to turn in the assignments, click on the assignment itself, 01.1. Go all the way to the bottom and click on Browse Local Files. In my case, I have been saving everything in that desktop folder. Desktop, week 01, and here's week 01 elements.psd. This is the file, one of the files that I want to turn in. Hopefully by the time that you get to this point, you'll have week 1 and principles.psd. Select it, click Open, and it then tells you that it's going to attach it to your assignment. Then do the same thing with your second file. I don't have the second file yet, but you will at some point. Once you have it, make sure that you select it. I'll just select another one. Then I have here, click Open, and now I know that I have 2 files that are going to be attached. Once that happens with your week 1 elements and hopefully your week 1 principles, you can click on Submit. I will not click Submit because I'll get an error because I cannot turn in assignments as an instructor. If you have any questions, please send me an email, ask your question, find me on Discord, and I'll see you in the next assignment.